Welcome to tonight's committee meeting for the Elizabeth City Pasquotank County Board of Education. And we are going to get started with a roll call from Ms. Tammy Sawyer.
Good evening. Sharon Warden.
Here.
Pam Pereza.
Here.
Rodney Walton.
Here.
Daniel Spence.
Here.
Dr. Sheila Williams. Mr. George Archuleta.
Here.
And Miss Virginia Houston.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Houston, could you read the ethics awareness statement for us, please?
Yes. Welcome to this meeting of the Elizabeth City Pasquotank County Board of Education. It is my duty to remind members of this board that it is your responsibility to avoid all conflicts of interest and potential conflicts of interest in accordance with Chapter 138A of North Carolina General Statutes. As public servants, it is our duty to continually monitor, evaluate, and manage our personal, financial, and professional affairs in such a way as to ensure the absence of conflicts or potential conflicts. Does any member know of any conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest with respect to any matter coming before the board this afternoon? Let the record reflect that no conflicts exist.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Houston. May I have a motion from the floor to approve the agenda for tonight? And a second.
Motion to approve.
Second. Okay. There's been a motion to approve the agenda as well as a second. Tammy, may we have roll call, please?
Yes. Pam Pereza.
Yes.
Rodney Walton.
Yes.
Daniel Spence.
Yes.
I have Dr. Sheila Williams not present this evening. Mr. George Archuleta.
Yes.
And Miss Virginia Houston.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Sawyer. Move on to the Financial, Business, and Technology Committee. And looking at the maintenance report from Ms. Wilkins. Does anyone have any questions about that report at this time? Is there anything specific that you would like to, is Ms. Wilkins with us tonight? I don't see her on.
No, ma'am, she is not.
Okay, never mind. All right. All right, next we're going to hear from our Chief Finance Officer, Rachel Haynes. She's going to give us some updates and discuss some budget amendments.
Chair Warden, Vice Chair President, and board members, good evening. The first attachments in your packet from finance is FBT02, and this is our finance report to date. So if you see the top graph says revenue by funding source, this is a snapshot of just what it says, our revenue by funding source. So we want to point out that 56.68% of our revenue comes from state, 16.49% from local, and 10.5% from federal to date. The next set of graphs is the breakout of the budget by purpose code, and then on the right by object code. So you'll see that 67% of the budget is in instructional services with 20 in system-wide support. And then by object code, 69% is salaries and benefits. The graph in the middle is a snapshot of the budget remaining balance. So you can see the blue column on the left is the budget, and the red column shows the decline in balance of how the funds spent. So that's our remaining. You'll see that detailed on the second page. The last two graphs show the expense by purpose code. So it shows how we've actually spent the money compared to the budget. So still 70% year-to-date spent in instructional services with 21 in system-wide support. And still by object code, 74% has been spent to date on salaries and benefits. So are there any questions about that report? And if not, we'll move over to the next page. And this is the expense report to date. So what we wanted to point out on this is that of our state funds, we are 81.95% spent and local at 74.74%. So we're right on track for this time of year. Are there any questions about those reports? Okay. Moving into budget amendments, FT 03. The first amendment in your packet is Amendment 107 revised. So this was last month's amendment. The transaction amount is correct. However, the beginning and the ending balance was incorrect. So we have corrected the beginning and ending balance. And we're going to have to ask that you approve this amendment as well. The next amendment in your packet is 108, still State Public School Fund. This shows an overall decrease of $18,951. We've reverted funds $19,340 in PRCO 32 and received an additional allotment in $389 in PRCO 85, which is in-class reading 3D. It also includes a conversion of transportation funds from 056 to PRCO 27 teacher assistants. So within our flexibility, we have moved funds from transportation to another PRC. Amendment number 205 is for the local current expense fund, and it shows no increase or decrease, but aligns budget with actual expenditures. Amendment number 308 is for federal funds and shows an overall decrease of $1,427. The decreases in PRCO 60 for the group home reversion, which is offset by an increase in PRCO 49. Amendment number 807 is for the local special revenue fund and shows an overall increase of $25 for a donation we received this month. Are there any questions about the amendments?
And these are, you're requesting them to be moved to the consent agenda for
Yes, ma'am.
the board meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
For action. Okay.
If there are no questions, that concludes my report.
No questions from anyone?
No, I make a motion that we put those items on the consent agenda for next week.
Yes. And a second? Second. Tammy, can you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes, ma'am. Who made the second, please?
Virginia
Houston. Thank you. Pam Perezza,
Yes.
Rodney Walton,
Yes.
Daniel Spence.
Yes.
I know that Dr. Williams is not present. George Archuleta
Yes.
and Virginia Houston.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we're going to hear from Dr. Spence. Thank you, Ms. Haynes. Now we're going to hear from Dr. Spencer about the calendar revision.
Good evening, Board Chair and Committee Chair Warden, Vice Chair Perezza, Interim Superintendent Ms. James Davis, board members and colleagues. This evening you have before you FBT 04, a request for a revision to the current 2020-2021 traditional school calendar. This revision requires action. The current traditional school calendar has June 4th as a required annual leave day. Per state statute, the calendar must have 10 built-in annual leave days. When this calendar was proposed to the board, graduation was planned for Memorial Day weekend. The graduation dates have changed to June 4th and 5th. We need to switch the required annual leave day with a required teacher workday. It is recommended that May 28th, which is a required teacher workday, and June 4th, the required annual leave day, be switched. Additionally, we would like to request the last day for students, May 27th, to be a 3-hour early release day. In previous years, the last day has been an early release day, and this year it was not reflected in our calendar. The state requires 1,025 instructional hours, and our district has superseded the required hours with 1,065. With a 3-hour early release on the 27th, the students will have had 1,062 instructional hours or 27 hours over the state's requirement. That concludes my calendar revision request. Are there any questions?
Are you asking for this to be moved to the consent agenda for action on the day of the board meeting, or would you like for us to take action on this today?
I'd like for you to take action today if that's possible,
Okay.
so that the teachers
I
can be
thought I
notified.
understood you correctly.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, does anyone have any questions about what Dr. Spencer has presented? Everybody's clear on the changes? Okay. Could I have a motion from the floor to accept those changes then?
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the changes to the calendar as requested.
And a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Okay, we need a roll call vote.
Pam Pereza,
Yes.
Rodney Walton,
Yes.
Daniel Spence.
Yes.
I have Dr. Williams Marks not present, George Archuleta,
Yes.
and Virginia Houston.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, thank you, Dr. Spencer. And now we're going to hear from Ms. Sawyer about the Board of Education meeting calendar.
Yes, Committee Chair Warden, Superintendent James Davis, board members and colleagues. I come before you today to present the proposed schedule of meetings for the board for 2021-2022. This schedule includes committee and regular meetings and reflects the latest starting times as determined by this spring by the board. While considering the placement of this schedule on the consent agenda for May 24th, I would also like to request that the board consider updating policy 2300, which is at your seat, to reflect the new regular meeting time of 6:00 p.m. as proposed on the calendar. And Chair Warden, if it pleases the board, I request the proposed meeting schedule and revised policy 2300 be placed on the consent agenda for May 24th. Are there questions?
Are there any questions about either one of these requests?
I have a question. The July 12th, it says tentative special meeting. What, I may have missed out. What is that for? Do we know?
Yes, that is in case we have any hearings from transfer requests.
Okay.
Anything else for anyone? Any questions?
I make a motion that we accept the meeting schedule for the 2021-2022 school year, and that, I'm sorry, that we place this on the consent agenda for next week. And the revision to policy 2300 to change the regular meeting time to 6:00.
I'll second
Mr. Archuleta seconded that. Ms. Sawyer. Okay,
Thank you.
roll call vote.
Pam Pereza,
Yes.
Rodney Walton,
it. Yes.
Daniel Spence,
Yes.
Dr. Sheila Williams is not present, George Archuleta,
Yes.
Virginia Houston.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes the information from the Financial, Business, and Technology Committee. And so we're going to move on to the Personalized Education Committee. Ms. Pereza.
Okay. First item on our agenda, we will have a graduation update from Dr. Amy Spencer.
Chair Warden, Vice Chair and Committee Chair Pereza, Interim Superintendent Ms. James Davis, board members, colleagues. Tonight I will be presenting graduation updates from the Elizabeth City Pasquotank Early College, Northeastern High School, and Pasquotank County High School. I'm going to start with a history of honor graduates. Prior to the graduating class of 2019, top honors were given to a valedictorian and salutatorian. Additionally, students who had achieved the highest grade point averages were recognized. These top students sat in the front of their class in rank order at graduation. Next slide. Latin distinctions began with the freshman class of 2015-2016 when they graduated in 2019. This came about as a result of the state's change to the grading scale, which went from a 7-point scale to a 10-point scale. Many districts in our state went to Latin distinctions. On June 22nd, 2015, the Elizabeth City Pasquotank Public Schools Board adopted Policy Code 3450 that reflected that change by stating, principals may designate a valedictorian and salutatorian. The board encourages principals with input from teachers, parents, and students to develop alternative or additional means of recognizing academic achievement. Since 2019, both Northeastern High School and Pasquotank County High School have used Latin distinctions to recognize honor graduates. So our graduation dates are up on the presentation, and you can see that Elizabeth City Pasquotank Early College is May 22nd, Pasquotank County High School is June 4th, and Northeastern High School is June 5th. For the 2021 graduates, the schools have planned on using Latin distinctions to recognize their honor graduates. For those students who have achieved honor graduate status, they will be recognized using these Latin distinctions. Students with a grade point average of 3.5 to 3.74 will be designated cum laude or with honors. Students with a grade point average of 3.75 to 3.99 will be designated magna cum laude with high honors. And students with a grade point average of 4.0 or higher will be designated summa cum laude with highest honors. These students were recognized at their school's award program and will be recognized at graduation. Students will sit alphabetically as a class. Honor graduates will be recognized in the program, with honor cords, and when their name is called. They have 3 different colors for the honor cords. And then when students are called to receive their diploma, they will have their Latin distinction announced. And then honor graduates will also be identified in the commencement program. Additionally, speeches will be given by students, and there will be student speakers, the Student Government Association president, and or the senior class president. Additionally, at Northeastern High School, you have the Cooper McLeese Award winners, and at Pasquotank County High School, you have the Pride of Pasquotank Award winners. These students are identified for being an overall well-rounded, good representative of their school and are nominated and voted on by their teachers. 1 male and 1 female from each of the comprehensive high schools is selected for each one of these awards. At Elizabeth City Pasquotank Early College, the students nominate a student to speak, and the student with the most votes is the one that will speak at their commencement. And then the traditional graduation ceremony will commence. Those are my updates. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have some questions. So this is the 3rd year in a row that we as a board have been asked about valedictorian and salutatorian. But according to policy 3450, there is nothing saying that we cannot, because it says a principal may. So this is a decision made at the school level on who to honor. Now, the concern I have is, well, I take that back. The concern that's been brought to me for 3 years in a row, when we've all had it, we've all had students talk to us, is that the unfortunate part is that it only usually affects 2 to 3 kids. And so we don't hear quite as much about it. The other concern is that those other individuals who get chosen to speak are voted on by either staff or their classmates. There are, I guess, concerns that the person who maybe, again, there's a highest GPA and there's a second highest GPA, that those 2 individuals may not fall into that category, and why can't we still do both? So again, as a board member, you think, like the first year we knew we were going to get questions and concerns because it was grandfathered in, like you said, since June of 2015, when that policy was updated from a valedictorian and salutatorian, probably, it probably stated will be to a, now it says a valedictorian and a salutatorian may be honored by the principal. So, you know, again, we knew the first year that it would be brought to us. We knew the second year it would be brought to us. And then again, last year, I know it was discussed with me by a couple of the parents who were in those positions and did not get recognized. So here we are again, and we've had letters. We've been asked. Ms. Rhonda James Davis received a letter. And again, you know, as a board, my question is, as a board member, what is the harm, or what is the question in doing both? Is there?
It's a principal, I mean, the policy says up to the principal.
Okay.
And so if you, to change it, you will need to change the policy. And if the policy is changed, if the board decides to do that and state it, then it will probably start with whatever that upcoming year's freshman class is, to be fair about it with all, you know, to be fair with all students involved.
Okay, so, but there's always going to, I mean, there's typically always going to be, I mean, I'm saying, why would you have to grandfather it in to start in 4 years? Because you're
Otherwise,
just adding, you're not taking something away. That's why it was grandfathered in the past. It was taken away as a designation and changed.
well, the policy states the principal gets to decide.
Right.
And so the principals are deciding to use the Latin. And if that's something that the board is choosing to do, then that policy would have to be changed. And when you change policy, you start with the freshman class.
Because it's the principal, I mean, I want to make sure, and I thought it was clear, that the principals make the decision. Have they indicated that they wanted to change, or do they want to keep the Latin designation?
They have not made an indication to me.
The confusion is, right, but the confusion has been is that it has been indicated that it was a board policy that we would no longer do that anymore. And the clarification is that policy does not say that. It says the principal may honor a valedictorian and salutatorian. I guess what Ms. Rhonda James Davis is saying is that the only way the board can change that is to say that they will.
Or else it's left up to the principals.
Right.
The way the policy states, it's up to the principals whether they have a valedictorian or salutatorian.
So if we would change it now, you are saying this could not go back till the freshman year
When you
of
change,
that class?
yeah, so when you change policies, to make it fair to all of the students, you start with a class, and usually the class that it starts with is the freshman class.
Because averages for making that selection would start in the student's freshman year, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
But we're not changing the 10-point scale. That's why we did that back then. That's why we did it with the freshman class, because we were changing the 10-point scale from the 7-point scale to the 10-point scale. Regardless, there's going to be a number 1 and a number 2. That's not taking anything away or changing anything.
or it could be a or 4 people with the same, or
Right.
5 people, correct?
Right. But, that was my understanding is the only reason why it started, because I specifically remember that this was decided on in June, and Sharon, me, we were elected in November of that year. And so that's like I said, that was my understanding, because I specifically asked, because I said, well, why is it starting in 4 years? And I knew exactly what was going to happen. Everyone was going to forget that this had been done so long ago. And they said it was because those students were going to remain on a 7-point scale and the others were going to be on a 10-point. It had nothing to do with the valedictorian, salutatorian. It had to do with the state grading scale changing from 7-point to 10-point.
But anytime you make a policy change that affects a number of students, you usually start with the freshman class.
Unless the board otherwise stated.
So if that's the case, when did we make the change that we go to the 10-point system?
You would have to, we're already on we're on the 10-point scale.
Right.
The
So
state-
when did we make that?
The state made
That
it.
was the state.
That was a state decision
That
and
was
it
a
was
state
made in
decision.
2015,
The
16.
state makes.
Yeah.
Correct.
So then what, I mean, I don't agree with them, but what's the argument then?
The
State made the-
2015, 2016 school year, the state went to a 10-point scale
Okay,
for the entire
okay, well, let's,
school system.
I understand the 10-point, but get rid of the, and I don't say I'm right, y'all can laugh at me, but the salutatorian and the valedictorian. Okay, when did we decide to get rid of that? Was that just last year or?
No,
That same year,
it was presented in 2016, 17.
15, 16.
No,
With the-
2015, 16.
With the freshmen.
Then the 10-point scale was authorized by the state,
Okay,
okay?
so last year into effect, correct? Because you
Actually,
said
it went in
fresh 1 year.
2019,
Right,
It was-
2019 was the first graduating class. So your freshmen, that policy, when they determined to do away with the valedictorian and salutatorian, those freshmen in that 15, 16 school year, that was communicated. So then their graduating class, they would have graduated in 2019. So the first graduating class with Latin distinctions was 2019.
But that part is not a state decision, correct?
no, that's a local decision.
That was a local decision.
Correct.
Yes, and it's actually a decision that's made on the school level, not at the board level.
Correct.
I mean, I'm just gonna get my 2 cents worth for whatever it's worth, I always do, but the fact remains, I've never been close to anything like that, but I'm sure there have been kids that have worked very hard, have studied very hard to get to that valedictorian and salutatorian position. They worked very hard to get there. And I'm just saying, they need to be awarded. And if they're not included in that
Or they're
vote
being,
to speak,
they're being awarded through
well,
the,
yes, but it's not the same. I'm sorry. These kids, you know, it's like, what are you gonna do of a state football team and one that comes in second? Well, you give the second place, they get a trophy or a second place, but there ain't the hoopla that the first place get it. And it's the same way. If a team wins by 1 point, hey, they're still the winner. And I look at these kids, like I said, I have never come close. And none of my family have to be anything like that. So I don't want you to think that's where I'm coming from. I'm just looking at 2 kids that have worked really hard, did their studies, did everything they can to get to that grade point, to get them to designations, if you will. And I think they deserve separate, other than just, well, this was our Victoria or salutatorian. Come on up, and we mention your name. I think they deserve to be spoken about, to have the chance to speak. I know one time someone made the comment about, well, the kids out there really don't care about that speech. I don't know. I think there are some kids that want to hear from these kids that have worked hard, that have set the example and have said, hey, I want to do this. So, I mean, it's a shame that if we change the policy, we have to wait another 4 years before that even gets involved. But I really think we all work hard at what's being done. And to give the principals, I mean, understand they're involved. And I say, yes, make them involved. But I just can't see why we can't have a policy over the principal. I'm sorry, that's the way I feel. But anyway, I appreciate y'all giving me a chance to speak.
May I
Thank you.
speak, please? Yeah, my elder daughter was military when she graduated from military school. But the issue with that, and I think she's old enough, so she might not be whatever. But when you look sometimes at the grade point averages among those top students, sometimes you have, sometimes you might have even 100 of a point. I mean, the separation is so sometimes just very, very close. And again, I don't have any, my second girl, and it's not, because she was not. I don't have a bone in this fight. But I guess my main purpose, and I may be wrong, but I think that those are the kinds of things that the teachers and the principal may take into account that, you know, I know, I mean, at the top is the top. It is. I agree with that. But sometimes the distinctions, you know, we can't do a broad base because you came in third or fourth or whatever. You didn't work just as hard as that person who came in at the top. I don't care which way it goes back. I really don't. I understand. I mean, I like the idea that the principal and the teachers make the decision. But I do think sometimes those distinctions, again, with just minute differences, sometimes cause us to think differently about students. That's what I'm saying.
And something else to consider, if I may, during the time that the state changed from the 7-point grading scale to the 10-point grading scale, there's actually a, possibility that you could have several students at that top level. You can have, I'm just saying, you can have 2 students who are the top 1, if that makes sense, or you could have 5 students who's at that top position because of that 10-point grading scale.
And that was the reasoning behind this several years ago, but to my knowledge, there's never been a tie. I don't know.
But that's what I was gonna ask. I don't want to sound smart, but I never heard of a tie. There's always been that one that's been up, but not saying it can't happen.
There have
My son's,
And how they do that? How did these things get back then?
Since we went to the 10-point scale,
Before the 10
for the 10-point scale, there was a tie.
but we also have college courses now. We also have AP courses that give different quality points that may have been a little bit different. We didn't have dual enrollment and things like that back then. And, that was one of the bigger arguments was that, that you may have multiple kids and maybe at that moment, that might have been because we did have more AP courses and things like that were offered. And at this point in time, like I said, from what has been told to me is that they're, the last 3 years, we've heard this. There was, again, it might come down to the last few minutes, but, again, you also have the argument of, well, I may not have been voted on my classmates or by my teachers or whatever to be the speaker at my graduation, but I did earn it on my own. I might have been nominated by my sports involvement, community involvement. I may not have been involved in any of that, but I did have the highest grade point average, which was what a student said to me.
Question, just real quick. Have you been superintendent, has any principals come to you? Has any principals come to you with concerns from parents or students about this? Since you said it's their decision, has any principals had any concerns? Because I know we get calls as board members.
Well, the principals have gotten calls, but they weren't concerned. Because that's when the Latin designations or distinctions, if you do have people who are tied, then, at least they are still recognized.
I'm talking with Sharon, like she mentioned about possibly doing both.
Oh, well, that hasn't been something that they've discussed.
Okay, that's all I was asking, the principal, okay.
I mean, we looked at the policy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And I was just going to say too, one of the things that did come up in a conversation was the fact that Latin distinctions do offer an opportunity to be able to recognize more students who have put forth that effort. So in the event, like you said, that there is a tie, think about those students who would graduate like summa cum laude, right? So you would have those students recognized, and so it wouldn't just be two, there would be more. But that doesn't go to the question that you were asking if there's both.
and ECSU's does something like, my niece got the Bear of the Mace.
Correct.
Is that the top in the class?
Yes,
Yes.
that's the
That's
highest
that's
GPA.
something that they use in the college level.
Mhm.
Right, so that's something similar to what I think you were asking here, right?
Right.
Still have the,
Valedictorian, if you will, and then have the Latin distinctions, because that's what the colleges do.
Well, we actually thought about, we talked with the principals about, having something like the Bear of the Mace, but something special for their schools. And the principals didn't want to do that.
But one thing I did want to
yeah.
the idea of grouping those students on the program, I also thought was important. I don't have a problem with grouping all the summa cum laudes with the little stars next to their names so that they stand out. And the magna cum laudes and then the summa cum laudes, and I know I've seen some universities do that. And that way, sometimes when they're calling the distinctions after the names, it's very easy to miss that. But if they were listed on the program, that's a forever keepsake for everybody to see. And again, it doesn't matter to me. Whatever the principals decide, since it's left up to them, if they decide to go back to Val and Sal, that's, I don't have a problem with that. But I would like for them to make the decision as long as that policy is in place as it is right now. And I would like to see they make the distinction for those students so that there is a recognition of their achievement.
And we discussed that in our meeting, whenever I was getting the information for graduation. So they will be recognized with boards. They are recognized in the program, and they will have the Latin distinction when their name is called as well.
What about
And
their,
they group together.
what about their seating? Can they sit together?
That was discussed, and one of the things that the principal said that they wanted to do was to have the class graduate as a class. That they wanted them to be seated in alphabetical order all together so that it would show one whole class graduating, and then have those distinctions with the chords, with the recognition in the program, and then with their name being called.
I just feel like
And their distinction would be announced along with their name.
Yes.
Okay.
I got a question really quick. It's two things. Well, we'll find out how it morphs into more than one thing. First and foremost, I do agree that, without the policy being changed, that a valedictorian and salutarian are important. So to George's point, that's an important role in a graduate class. But then to Pam's point, that if this comes up, in my opinion, there's a communication breakdown somewhere between the board, the teachers, principals, and the public. Because if we're answering this question since 2015, that's been in place, there shouldn't be phone calls or emails going out about this because it's already, the policy's in place, it's been adopted, and we're moving forward. So to come back 1, 2, 3, 4 years later, and we're still answering this question, obviously there's something that's a breakdown. So where is the breakdown? That's my question. So with that being said, without changing policy and without, the conversations that we have with the principals, like, I'm not sure how that went, what conversations parents had with those principals with regard to that. And the big deal is going to fall down to percentage points. How many students? It may not be more than a handful of students that's going to fall into this category anyway, but the priority should still rest on the fact that these students have had great success through their school experience. and should be, rewarded in kind. But without having to go back and make a policy change that's going to take effect, like how can, if we remove ourselves from it, the board, because that's what it sounds like to me that our responsibility is there's no responsibility of the board. So if it goes down to the principals and the teachers, then how did it get to this point where parents are still coming to the board to find out about what are you guys going to do about it? And, short answer, nothing, which makes the public upset, which probably makes the principals upset because they'll feel like we didn't do our part. So if we didn't do our part, but there's another part for us to do, then we can't just, volleyball it back and forth. It's your turn to take the responsibility. It's your turn to accept the responsibility. So my thing is, at this point, the policy is what the policy is. And we have the grading system that we're going with at this point. The principals have made a decision, but it still lands back up right here, right now. And Dan and I being, I guess, the newest members on the board, and this policy going into effect right at, I guess, you guys' turn coming in, it was already handled at that point. And like Ms. James Davis has stated, it's not going to change for 4 years with the freshman class then. That's going to be coming up for graduates at that point. So what we'll be looking at for the next 3 years is what are we going to do about this particular situation again? So my question is, since I said it was going to morph, my question is, how do we address it today, next meeting, to make sure that, if this is a thing that we can put in place now, going forward, without having to change policy? Is it something we can do? I don't know. Is it something that needs to be talked more about? I don't know. But there is a definite communication breakdown between us, the principals, the public, where people aren't sure, and then we looking around trying to figure out, like, well, we got the policy and the policy says, and you can interpret the policy many different ways, but it states what it states. So if it's gonna be clear, let's be clear going forward, that we address it, and we address it one time, so we're not gonna come back next year and try to figure out, do we need to make a policy change? Because me, personally, I don't want to have to make a policy change for this.
And I think people understand it. I think the parents understand it. They just don't accept it. Because, they'd like to see it change. So I don't think that's the part.
But that's my question. Do they want to see the policy change, or is there something within the policy that we can do without having to change the policy?
I don't think they're even looking at the policy. I think they're looking at the results of the policy as it applies to them. And right now, the policy, I'm just being frank. I'm talking about the parents who asked me the question. But the thing is, as Ms. Perez has said, the policy allows the principals to make that distinction if they choose to do so. So that's where it stands. And, if they choose to make it this year, could they make it this year? If Ms. Barton.
See, as a board, I don't want to be sending parents, go knock on their door, because they're going to be like, well, we're at your door. So I don't want to send them to the next house over if it's something that we don't have to do, per se.
But perhaps, I don't know, is that why they are at our door? Because they've exhausted that meaning I don't know. But
Okay.
the confusion has been that it's possibly a board policy. When you read the policy, it says they may recognize a valedictorian and salutatorian.
So if on the principal level, the answer was no, let's just say, nope, we're not going to do it. If that was the answer, then that answer needed to be communicated to those who were inquiring about it. So again, this is not an issue.
Just ask the question.
But if it's not, then here we are. And do we want to be here next year answering the same question?
Changing probably.
It's, it was my understanding that, I know at least one of the schools, it was a question. And that principal, was just like the other ones and didn't make an indication that they wanted it changed. And I'm just saying they, just to not single out anyone.
So then, can we have Ms. Spencer then at least tell the principals, You know, I'm not trying to throw it on you, but what I'm saying is. Somebody needs to explain it, and being the principals are the ones that are in charge and making the decisions,
Sure.
they need to be told. It is on them, it ain't on us.
They,
The-
I never realized that. And yeah.
Why are we
Yes, they
still
do.
getting these calls then?
And it's communicated several places
Right.
in
So
handbooks.
in the course catalog,
In the catalog, it was they ran an article in the paper.
they did.
So, and I don't know, but I understand that it was put out on Parent Square as well, but I don't know that for sure.
So the only reason we do is make
We
a
didn't have
policy,
parents.
correct?
No, back then, no, I
I
don't,
mean, this year
oh,
about graduation, has it not been put out yet?
I did not put anything out about, graduation, but that could have been communicated, at the school level, yes.
Okay, I didn't know.
But yeah, it's communicated. I think it comes down, and I'm not sure, just my opinion, I think it comes down to just not liking what's communicated.
Right, but so again, taking all that for what it's worth, like how do we, and this is not for us to pass this off to somebody else. Like, how do we ensure ourselves, and ensure ourselves is probably something I'm asking a huge task that we may not be able to do. How do we ensure ourselves that we're not sitting back here a year from now? And like I said, I don't particularly want to change the policy if it's gonna, cause the next 3 years to have the same question come up. But if it needs to be changed, then, we need to act on it. So 2025-6, that class will then have a valedictorian, salutatorian, and there wouldn't be a question how we're gonna do it, because it's already been voted on and I guess passed this year. So how do we do that?
I think the only way to do that is for the board to change the board policy and to take that away from principals, if that's the way that,
The thing,
because the principals, they're not, I think they're satisfied with the way it is now.
Right. And so I don't want to take anything away from anybody who's doing it. Like, that's not my intent at all.
Mhm.
But again, it's just like I said, and like you said, communication is out there, but obviously communication is not making it to certain people who need to see the policy and know this is how it's being done. That needs to be in bold, underlined. Somebody out there to speak on it to make sure that, you guys get this. Come graduation, this is what it's going to look like. So there shouldn't be any questions.
Mhm.
If there is, they're directed to the principal, and the principal know to expect that phone call, that email, that, letter. So if that's the case, then that's the case.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm saying. Maybe the principals don't know. And it would be just the people, probably the parents of the valedictorian and salutatorian, but still, and the student themselves. And I know one student last year, because we all got letters, they felt strongly.
the year before last.
Okay, maybe. Yeah.
19.
But anyway, but I think those parents need to let the principals know this is something that we feel very, very strongly about, as do our students. And you need to consider it because the ball really is in your court. And it's, it's not going to hurt anybody else per se, although I do understand the philosophy behind it. But you're right, they're doing.
But that's
change the
my
policy.
point. Exactly, Ms. Houston. It's like 2 years ago. So here we are 2 years later, and it may not have been an emphatic letter that's been sent out, but here we are 2 years later. Like, these are things that don't necessarily need to continue to go on, because we can't nip those. We can't answer those and be emphatic with our answer. Our decision has been made, and continue to move forward without having to rehash this another year from now, another 2 years from now. 'Cause I'm sure you guys didn't want to have to come back to this 2 years later, and you don't want to go back to it 2 years from now, go forward to it.
And that was my point, is that I feel like I've sat here every year and heard the same thing over and over. And the people who have been in those seats have wanted those distinctions. It's finally at a point where it's like, okay, we heard it the first year from, trying to think.
And like I always say-
I'm not going to say the name. I'm just trying to think of the name. But then the next year, I remember specifically the student came to us. And then last year, I did hear from individual on behalf of the
one at one school.
If there's anything I'm missing, please let me know. Because like I said, Daniel and I, we're new to this whole thing. This, to me, seems like something that it's not necessarily, earth shattering, but it's something that should be addressed if there's an issue. You know what I mean? If it's again, 1 to 5 kids, that's still an issue. Because if it affects the whole class body, that's an issue. But everybody, you're going to try and treat everybody the same way, which is in our mission statement of what we're looking to do with our students. So how do we do that and then tell these 4 or 5 kids, but not you?
And I probably shouldn't open this can of worms, but I'm gonna do it just for the sake of all truth. When we first did it, we have been told that all the counties in the surrounding areas would be moving to the Latin system. They did not.
We took the bold step. And as a
Hold on.
leading.
Miss something. Bold, say that, tell me that again.
The district at that time took a bold step.
Took the bold step as a leader and innovator to go with the Latin distinctions instead of the valedictorian and salutatorian, under the advisement of at the time, she was the current director who oversaw the guidance counselors. And through conversations with those professionals, through conversations with student representatives and parent groups, they made the decision to go with the Latin distinctions instead of salutatorian and valedictorian. And they came, presented it, and we were, as we are supposed to, supportive of that decision, because that is a management decision. It is not a governance decision, which is our role. Our role is to support the management decisions. And at the time, that was the decision that was made for the benefit of all parties involved. And so that's where we are.
Okay, back to the original thing that Pence was talking about, doing both. To do that, we'd have to change policy, is what you're saying? No?
No,
Well, let's do that.
that's not the
And let's-
principle.
It is up to the principals.
Well, it's up to
So right now, we could do both, but the principal each school
the
has to make that
principal,
decision.
I agree with they.
The only way we can override that is the board changes the policy and we, the board, say there's both. We change the policy and the board says,
Well, actually, the policy says that if you look at the policy.
It says you may.
Let me look at 3450.
which I find out.
Is this the policy that came from the state, or did we make the policy?
No, the policy was, as usual with policies, was something that came from recommendation from the North Carolina School Board Association. We take a look at it. We put any caveats that we want to put in locally. We make sure that those are going to be okay. And then it becomes policy. I'm trying to find that policy.
I believe Ms. Godfrey is going to.
You got it, right?
Yeah, it says, while high school principals may designate a valedictorian and salutatorian, the board encourages principals with input from teachers, parents, and students to develop alternative or additional means. So additional means, and it says they may designate a valedictorian or salutatorian.
So
But it's
again,
their decision.
again, the policy right now says
Right.
they can do both of them. They can do both, but it's the principal's decision to do both.
It's the
Yes.
principal's decision.
Right.
Right.
It's in the
The only-
second
It has
paragraph.
nothing to do with.
So the only way they can change is if we change the policy that says you have to
You
do
must.
this. You must do both.
And then it would go back to the 4 years, right?
Well,
Again, usually when you start, usually when you
I'm just trying.
develop, yeah. But usually, and I'm using that disclaimer because, I mean, if you all say something differently, then, I mean, that'll be up to the board. But usually when you implement policies, you start, especially high school policies, generally you start with the freshman class. And so whatever happens with the freshman class, then by the time they're seniors, then that's when.
Which is what happened with.
But,
I'm just trying to.
but if they have permission, there's no reason to wait 4 years because that was about grade point average and going from a 7-point scale to a 10-point scale. This is just saying we're just saying you have to do this, not, or that you must do this versus you may. That's the only
How do you
difference.
calculate valedictorian? How does somebody get selected as
It's-
Val-a-sal? How does that work?
It's
Maybe that could help us get some clarity.
right,
It's just the top is the top.
right.
For the
It's
1 year?
It's based on percentage.
On the last
all 4 years. Yes.
So that's all.
All of the high school
All of the high
courses.
school.
4 years.
The course work
That's
throughout
why
the
I'm
year.
looking at that.
It's based on percentages, and it's based on courses that you take, because different courses have different
Weights,
levels, different weights.
right. So an honors class has 0.5, it's like 0.5 higher, and then your AP classes count for 1 additional point
Right.
when you're calculating that GPA. And on the transcripts, they do have those weighted and unweighted GPAs as well as the ranks.
So
And
just
that's
one,
what matters to colleges.
so just one question before them.
The
So,
class rankings.
so the senior class this year, that's there now. Could we go back and look at all 4 years of their grades to this?
They already have.
It's on their transcript. It's not.
No, I'm saying, could we?
Yeah, they already have their GPAs.
Yes, they do.
They've already done that.
They've done that and their ranking and everything. All of that is on the transcript. And as Chair Warden said, that's what colleges look at. And that goes way back. I'm old.
Clear.
They did it back for me too. We went to know the rank.
That's after the third, 9 weeks or whatever.
That third one, they're 15 years.
But the idea is still that with all the rankings already in place, if the principals don't agree to doing this, it doesn't get done.
Mhm.
So the numbers are there,
Right.
and we could say who your 1 through 6 is, but that's not what's in place at this point.
But Pam, didn't you say there was a way to do both or not? Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
So Northeastern nominates, as she said, Northeastern nominates as far as who is speaking at graduation, because the label and the speaking is probably, the designation and the ability to speak in front of your class is probably one of the most important parts to that valedictorian and salutatorian. Right now, the people who speak at Northeastern are nominated and voted on by staff.
Correct. That's the Cooper and McLeese. And then at Pasquotank County High School, it's the Pride of Pasquotank.
When the students nominate and vote. So it's
So it's more like a popularity contest.
Not with the teacher.
No, I didn't say that, but you said the students.
That's at the early college. So the early college did not have Cooper and McLeese. This is, or a Pride of Pasquotank. But what they did do, and this is their first year, is the students nominated the speaker, and the one with the most nominations at the early college was the speaker. But at the high schools, both comprehensive high schools, those were selected, nominated by teachers, voted by teachers. And they were those students who were good with academics, but also well-rounded. So it could have been athletics. Were they a good representative of their school? Did they, in the community? So it was more of, that was the criteria as opposed to just academics.
And prior to, during, I know Pasquotank, and I think Northeastern, all of the Valley and the South, but as did the.
And Cooper and McLeese, yes.
Right, so you had 4 speakers usually rather than 2.
And
So,
now,
it's easy to,
right.
but it's a choice.
So that's how they would do it, George. They could keep the Cooper McLeese and the Pride of Pasquotank,
Correct.
and then they could do valedictorian and salutatorian at each school.
But the only way to do both right now, do we change policy?
No, the principals can decide to do that.
Right, but they've already decided, so.
Would that help anybody if You ask the principals?
We've had the discussion with the principals already. I mean,
That's what I asked you.
How do they, how do their students, do they have any indication as to how their students feel about?
do you know that? That I don't know.
And did they speak to the students who possibly could have been in those positions? Like I would have preferred that, again, you know what, you and this particular scoring system would have been number one, but we don't do that because of how our policy is. I mean,
No, not policy. Because of our decision, the graduation committee decision planning.
I don't know. I just feel like that the opportunity for that is something that you can't get back once the time has passed. And when I graduated, which was a million years ago, that was what we did. And we did have a 2-hour, 3-hour graduation ceremony because there were so many people who spoke. But those two were two of the people who, and as a class, we understood. Like I knew why George was up there speaking as a valedictorian because he was the smartest kid in class. And didn't maybe know him well, but I appreciate the fact that he finished number one. So again, the communication, it doesn't fall back to us directly.
I think the only other concern that has been brought that hasn't been mentioned is the concern that there were other districts that were supposed to do this. They did not. And it's very hard for our community to understand why we don't honor our top two in our high schools, but every district around us does. And they feel that it's unfair. And right now, I mean, after 3 years of listening to the arguments, I agree. So,
I think one of the things, just to piggyback off of what you said, our local paper
That's what I said.
highlights the valedictorians and the salutatorians from every school. And because we opted to not have the valedictorian and salutatorian, they did not highlight anyone. And one of the things that I want to strongly emphasize is that those students need to be highlighted in our local paper.
but it should be the
Yeah.
first and second in their class.
Can we take a break? That's getting ready to go out for some reason.
Okay, all right,
And then we can maybe pick up the discussion. How long will it take?
okay, all right. Could we take a break now for about 3 minutes?
I will.
Maybe that's why I'm.
Yeah, I said, when I have a mask on, I talk a lot.
It's both.
It's like I'm or something.
It looks like it's angle in here, right? So,
It's right here too.
yeah, that would make sense. We're all the way away from.
We have our technical problem taken care of, and so we're back online. Dr. Spencer, you have a testing update for us as well. Oh, okay. You want to continue with the
Is
graduation?
there any other comments or questions for Ms. Spencer about graduation update? I have another question in addition to this, but, about the policy.
So I guess at this point, we're leaving it, we as a board, or leaving it as it is. And it's been talked to the principals and the families about it. And at this point, again, it's not in our jurisdiction. Like I said, to me, I just felt like there must have been a communication gap, not knowing the history first and foremost, but coming back and forth to it, year after year. I felt that you guys would have known that, this is why it does come back. So it could be expected or not expected, but here we are. And then I guess listening to it for the first time and being objective about it, like from my opinion, and that's what I was listening, for myself, it's my opinion based off what I know about graduation. And again, it just felt like maybe there's a communication gap or a communication breakdown that, the parents or the students were involved that have this opportunity and they do not get the opportunity. That's why they're asking about it versus more people want to know about it, because it's not going to be by a few people that's going to be a concern. So if it's nothing for us to do, I still feel like there's a void that, I don't know, I don't want to be in a moat in the school board and look out at everybody else and just say, listen, there's nothing you can do about it. Sorry. I just feel like that's where we are.
Like I said, I know we've had a discussion, I've had a discussion, Dr. Spencer and I had with the principal. And, the only thing I can say, is communicated in the course catalog. And say maybe at the beginning of the year, I thought it was in handbooks, but if it's not, we'll make sure it's in handbooks. And if the board decides to change the policy, then again, right now, it's left up to the principal, and the principals are satisfied with the way that it is. beginning of this calendar year, in January, February, I'll even having like that person to kind of like be the bearer of this, and they do not want to do that.
So that goes back to my question, because again, if we had this conversation in January, for me, there should not be a conversation in May. But we talked about it. And for those ones who are lucky enough to be at that top, they didn't get to the top in the last 9 weeks or the last 18 weeks. So they knew where they were. We had the conversation about we converted the school system rather, and this isn't gonna happen from June. To let it be known that, as you finish up, we have this in place based off the policy. So this is what you should expect when we get to close out at the end of the year. So that's what I'm trying to find out. How do we continue to have this conversation and still have people who still want to ask questions? So again, feel free to ask questions, obviously, but are we not being clear?
Well, I know when it was first brought to me, when it was in our school board member, because the parents asking. And so then, that's when I first talked to the principal about it. And, then I think it's still coming up because the same parent is asking. So I don't know how to get it clear, like I said, other than to, I think it is in the, I'm just not sure about the handbook. I know it's in the staff, the horsepower law.
So the statement has been clarified. And the policy has been clarified that it states that they may. So the principal may not wish to. And regardless of whether we should go next week to another to change the policy, we can put that on the agenda for the consent agenda for action for the board meeting. So to vote or to change the policy. If your motion is to change the policy, that what you're asking?
If you make a motion now, we still get to the discussion phase, right?
Before I could vote, I'd like to get it changed. Right, that's what I'm asking, is it a purchase amendment?
Motion now.
Are you saying make a motion to put on consent agenda to do the discussion, to vote on, or how do you?
Yeah, do you want to make a motion to put it on the consent agenda for the board meeting?
Yes, you have to vote on it now, whether it goes on the consent.
Okay, well, we know what the change from what it is now before. What would we change?
So, as part of discussion, I would make a motion that we consider changing the policy to either say that the board strongly encourages recognition of valid claims in the school, or that schools will recognize a valid claim.
And I don't second that motion. Ms. Stockton, could you pull up the policy again? Because it's gonna be the wording that we're gonna change, correct?
So, yes, and so that makes it part of discussion, but I'm gonna make the motion either way. And then you can vote on whether.
Okay. So we're looking at paragraph 2 or paragraph 3.
The second, principals may. And where it says the board encourages them to develop alternative or additional means for recognizing academic achievement.
So while high school principals may designate value to the board encourages principals
with input from teachers, parents, and students to develop alternative or additional means of recognizing academic achievement. So what do you want to change it to? Because that's actually, I mean, we're saying that policy states that if they choose to designate a valedictorian, salutatorian, they may.
Well,
And
but we're saying encouraging principals to develop alternative and additional means. Change it to say encourages principals to designate valedictorian, salutatorian. We're still encouraging, we're not saying they have to. We're encouraging them to designate a valedictorian, salutatorian along with alternative or additional means of recognizing academic achievement. That's my motion. Because here we're saying you may, here we're saying you're encouraged. I would like to make the motion that the statement says the board encourages principals to designate a valedictorian, salutatorian, and then with input from teachers, parents, and students, develop alternative or additional means of recognizing academic.
So with the encouraging, just to get the understanding, the encouraging, are you saying that they have to have one? Because encourage will still be.
No, because it is a general consensus that we're talking about governance versus management. And if we're gonna encourage this other part, I feel like we should encourage that as well. That's my motion.
Okay, so is that, you're thinking encouragement is stronger than that?
Yes. Because we're doing the second part through encouragement. We're not doing the first part because we're saying that. That's just my,
Okay.
that's just my rationale.
Encourage the first part too, encouraging. Okay, so
So it's still leaving up to the principal's decision.
Yeah.
We have to.
I don't,
She can make whatever motion she wants. She can tell her.
and you really go to that, doesn't mean that second step. It just means that.
I would like, to.
Okay, you're right.
Right.
I was trying to get that.
What do you second, right?
yes, second. Did you get that?
Roll call. Amber. Yes. Rodney Walton.
Yes.
Daniel Smith.
No.
George Archuleta.
Yes.
No.
Three yes.
I can't make a decision between May and third.
My other question about graduations for you guys is in terms of capacity and how we update the toolkit voted on and update Thursday by the State Board of Education. Did that change the capacity limits for graduation?
Have not seen as of yet.
They voted unanimously, I believe, to update, to take the recommendations from the toolkit, that they made to the toolkit. And then one of those, recommendations, they did not list them. They were written, they were written, but the, board voted on accepting the updates to the toolkit on Thursday.
They updated the toolkit on May the 14th. I believe that was Friday.
It's not online yet, that's what I was thinking.
It's online, but they haven't updated that part yet.
That's what my question.
Yeah, they
And when
updated
put
the face
those updates-
covering. They updated the face covering, but they didn't update anything else that I've seen.
Okay, and so will we be allowing a limited capacity, because the toolkit says that it must follow the current capacity guidelines, and so the questions that have been asked of me is, are we limiting graduation tickets or are we at full capacity?
until we get the guides, I don't know what to do for that with that. What we will, whatever the toolkit says is what we will follow.
It says, I looked at it because I got so many questions about it, but as far as interim guidance and special events and graduation ceremonies, that, the North Carolina Department of Instruction and Health and Human Services offer, interim guidance and important reminders of our responsibility to abide by the requirements outlined by the current executive order and the toolkit to maintain because and safety, decisions to conduct special events or graduation ceremonies at the discretion of the school boards and teachers. So that those requirements need to be outlined by the current executive order and the toolkit. And so when you click on that, it goes to the current, which has the confusion is when you click on that, it goes to the current executive order, which has no restriction on outside gathering.
Right. Correct, but then sometimes when you get to the executive order, it'll say, not for schools or not, this doesn't apply to schools or whatever. And so that's why I wait for things to come out on the toolkit, then I'll know what to allow.
So are you anticipating a restricted attendance to graduation or a full capacity of the state?
Well, again, until I get I'm not anticipating anything just yet until I can see what the toolkit is gonna say, honestly.
Well, I guess the question is that, some students have been told that typically going to get half of what it was last year.
And
Because that's based on
that's
the
based on what the current guidelines are.
So
That could change if the guidelines change.
We don't have enough time. So let's say, for example, again, communication. It changes if it does. It does change.
If it changes, it changes.
And then we have enough time to facilitate getting them the additional tickets. Are we gonna be able to do that?
I'm sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
the tickets aren't given out until the day of the virtual graduation or virtual.
So the information comes down, we find out X, whatever X is, and they have to give the benefit for families to, more people to be able to attend. We won't have to worry about getting that information out.
but you have families that are traveling from out of town and things like that, and they have limited, space for staying overnight, that's a huge graduation weekend. That was just the question that was asked of me, and I cannot answer that question because as it stands now, this document itself is very conflicting. As a matter of fact, it says, the discretion is to conduct these events is at our discretion and your discretion.
But then it also says about following from this toolkit. And that's what I've been following.
And then it must also be the executive order, which has limited all outside mask and capacity restrictions. So there's just a lot of confusion as to why, you can have prom and things like that. And again, it has an additional element about and that's athletic. But now we're all 2 to 3 weeks later now, and the governor has lifted it. Do you have any word that we're going to, from anywhere inside sources or anything like that?
Not yet, because they did update the toolkit on Friday. I'm looking at it right now, as a matter of fact. And it was last updated on, originally published June the 30th of 2020, updated May 14th of 2021.
See, so this here says April 2021 for this particular section. So that was my question, was there any indication during that they had noted?
As a matter, all of them that I've been on, they're still following the strong schools toolkit. And even with the order that the governor came out with last week, it was one thing that I read was some exceptions and some childcare centers, and it specifically said schools.
Right, but indoor school, since they wanted to no masks outside and everything like that. I mean, it's just so confusing. It's just, on one hand you're saying this, on one hand you're saying that, and at some point, I mean, like, almost like a sister, you talk to the citizen and it's
50% is toolkit, 50% is executive order.
And here's where I go with the school toolkit, because when it comes out and things changes, it'll tell you what's required and what's recommended. And you need to do those things that are required. But to go back to your original question, once we get some guidance.
Changes are then.
Then we will,
Any other?
Dr. Spencer about that. And how to testing that way.
oh, is she here?
So, we have Nina Durkin, who is our testing lead. So she will be getting that.
Good evening, Chair Warren, Vice Chair Perez, distinguished board members, and interim superintendent James Davis. I come to you this evening to present information in regards to the ECPPS district benchmark data for the 2021 school year.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, so this school year, and I can share this presentation with you all afterwards, but I do this school year, ECPPS has been able to utilize iReady and T21 instructional and benchmark programs. iReady has been used in grades kindergarten through 8th grade for reading and math instruction. And what iReady is a comprehensive assessment and instructional program that empowers educators with resources they need to help all students succeed. By connecting diagnostic data and personalized instruction, iReady reduces complexity, saves educators time, and makes differentiated instruction available in every classroom. So that's what we're using for kindergarten through 8th grade for reading and math. For 5th through 8th, biology, English 2, North Carolina Math 1, and North Carolina Math 3, we're using TE21. And it's designed to generate and market benchmark assessments that deliver 95% of end of grade performance predictability rates to assist schools, districts, and other educational entities in targeting instruction to improve education for students. So on our next slide, here we have some data. This year we have been able to use iReady through the entire school year for our kindergarten through 8th grade students. So, for our reading and math for the beginning of the year, all of our students were still in remote when we took the first one. So as you can see up here for this data, like I said, I can show you this presentation with you all so you can have these numbers. For kindergarten, our reading started out with 72%. Then in the middle of the year, we were back, some hybrid, some still at home, some back in school. Middle of the year went to 76%. And then recently, just in the last few weeks, we are now at 81% for our kindergarten in reading. When math is right up under that one, we are 58% at the beginning of the year, 65% at the middle of the year, and 64% at the end of the year. And of course, it goes on to the next grade level. First grade, as you can see, was 41%, 42%, and 51%. As you can see, it trends and it grows. And it's one thing that I've really noticed is that at the beginning of the year, everybody was home. Then in the middle of the year, we started coming back into school. And now here at the end of the year, we have more children who are in school. So it's starting to grow. Although we're still in a challenging or different type of year, where students are still making gains. So on the next slide, we have our 3rd through 5th grade. And of course, these are our tested grades when we do EOGs. So in our 3rd grade reading, we started out at 44% at the beginning of the year. Middle of the year was 49% and 51% now right now at the end of the year. For math, they started out at 15%. And then our proficiency grew to 25%, and now we are at 30%. Reading was 32% at the beginning of the year, 34% for middle of the year, and 41% year end. And then we're going to go ahead down to math, where it is 18%. As you can see, we do need to work on our math to boost that their proficiency level up. So we were 18%, and then we went to 25% and 30% at the end of the year. And our last grade level at the elementary level is 5th grade. We started out at 28% in reading and went to 31%, and then we are now at 40%. And for math, of course, we are at 19%, 20%, and now we are at 35%. On the next slide, we'll be going to our middle schools who are also using it for reading and math. The 6th grade, we started out at 24%, and then we had a slight dip with 23%, and we went back to 32%. Of course, this is all of our 6th graders across our district. For reading. So for math, we have 19%, 26%, and then 35%. It goes on down to our 7th grade, where we started out at 22%, and we went to 27% for the middle of the year, and now they are at 35%. And our 7th grade math was 14%, 19%, and 28%. 8th grade, which is our final grade of middle school, we started out at 28% for our reading, then went to 31%, and we are now at 40% in reading. And our 8th grade math was 21%. It stayed consistent for the middle of the year, and then we had a jump up to 33%. The good thing about seeing this data is that our teachers can also go back and look at the data because it breaks it down for each individual student, and they can know how to group. If the program groups them, it tells them exactly what standards those students need to work on, and they can personalize it and have individual instruction. So on our next slide, we are now at our science. Because I-Ready does not incorporate science at the time, we had to go with TE21. This year, we had started a late start with TE21, but we were able to get at least 2 benchmarks in February and also in April. So in 5th grade science, they had 42%, 42.6%, and then we had a little bit of growth at 47.8% for our 5th grade science across the district. In 8th grade, we had 50%, 50.6%, and then we went down to 45.4%. We're going to go ahead to the next slide real quick, where I'm going to explain something to you, what I think may have happened. So then, of course, we use TE21 for our benchmarks in high school. With our biology, we had 42.8% for the first benchmark, then 39.2%. And you're going to see it drop all the way down. English 2 was 52.4%, and then we went to 39.3%. For our Math 1 classes, we had 32.8%, and then we went down to 24.8%. And Math 3 was 37.4% and 29.5%. So what I think happened in that last benchmark is we went back into remote status due to the uncertainty of our community with Andrew Brown. And a lot of students, were a little bit withdrawn during that time. And so, some of them may not have been able to complete the benchmarks within the time that was given. I did add on some extra days, but we were still out for the remainder of the time, and I had to go ahead and send that information on to the team so we could get those scores processed so that teachers could use that data to help drive their instruction. But the good thing is, it is just a predictor, and our teachers did get the data back, and they were able to go and continue to teach to the best of their ability. So if we can go to our next slide. As you all know, we are in the testing window. Our window has been open for a long time now. Our fall testing, when I was last with you all, we talked about ways that we were going to try to get our students to come in. Well, guess what? They have been coming in. They were coming in throughout all of this time, not just the fall. So I put up here your fall numbers, and these were all of the numbers of tests that we were expecting to take. In biology in the fall, we were expecting to do 125. And we were able to administer a total of 89 so far. And we have about 36 left to do. So I do have some students who are assigned, who are scheduled to come in this week. We even have some that are scheduled to come in June, since this window will be open until July the 5th to get these done. Because we know if we want our high school students to definitely take their EOC courses because it counts for 20% of their final grade. In English 2, we had 204 students. we were able to administer 155, we have 49 left. For Math 1, we have 105 students that had to take tests in the fall. We were able to do 80, we have 25 of those students left. And then, of course, Math 3, we had 152 tests to do, and we had 129, and 23 of those are remaining. Still, our data is not solid yet because we don't have all of our tests in. So I would hate to give you a falsified number or where we are proficiency-wise. In the spring, these are our anticipated numbers. This, in our spring window for our high school, our traditional high schools will open on the 21st, which is this Friday. And our early college and our elementary and middle school started last Thursday and Friday. So we're now, of course, in testing season, full term. So biology this year, we're going to have 265 for our spring. English 2 will be 154. Math 1 will be 230. And then, of course, Math 3 will be 127, which will be a total of 776 EOCs that we will be completing by July 5th.
For the fall, do you have any students that we spent that graduation?
There was one student that I have been informed of from one of the high schools, and he was a senior, and he took Math 3, if I'm not mistaken, in the fall, but he did not take his exam. So he did not actually pass that particular class, so he was able to take it again in the spring, the operation for that. But he's coming in next week to take his fall exam. So he'll still be able to get credit because he's gonna pass this semester, he's passing, so he'll be able to graduate. No, ma'am, not that I have been informed of, that was just one for this moment. Are there any other questions? And like I said, I can definitely share this with you all. And then once we are completely done with all of our testing, we'll do a synopsis of everything and where we stand. And as you all know, that our schools will be keeping their same grades from the 18-19 school year, because of, how the U.S. Department voted for accountability portions. Well, thank you all. You all have a great evening. Thank you.
Ms. Warren, before we go to our interviews, we need to switch back audio settings if you're okay with me taking another break. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see.
Opportunity to appoint COA trustee board member for this term. The trustee that was currently representing us on the Board of Trustees at COA, his term ends as of June 30th. So we developed a new policy to select the members for the COA trustee, Board of Trustees. And that involves their sending in a letter of interest or an application. And then we are conducting an interview with each one of the candidates. So tonight, we are going to begin that process with our first candidate, Mr. Doug Gardner. Doug, you can either stand right there or you may take a seat, whichever you prefer.
Happy to stand.
Okay. All right. Now, we received your letter of interest, and what we would like for you to do is kind of indicate to us why it is that you wish to fill this position. Go into a little detail about your background. Tell us what you'd like, expound on anything you would like to expand on, and also give us an indication as to how you will represent us or advocate for us, ECPPS, on the COA Board of Trustees.
Okay, I'll try to do that. As my letter of application indicated, I did serve 11 years as a trustee from Pasquotank County on the COA Board of Trustees. I've done quite a bit of volunteer work in this community over 40 plus years, and I would say that no single volunteer gig has been more satisfactory than being on the Board of Trustees and the COA Foundation. I think that higher education is the number one thing that we can offer our citizens in this county and this area to improve their lives. We're fortunate to have 3 institutions of higher education in the community. My wife is active with the Foundation Board at Elizabeth City State University. I Did serve as chairman of the finance committee for a number of years while I was on the board of trustees. As I said, I have 11 years experience and almost 23 years volunteering with the foundation. So I believe that I could get back into the swing of things as a trustee rather rapidly. I wouldn't have the learning curve that a brand new candidate might have. As you may or may not know, the only person that the Board of Trustees at a community college can hire or fire is the president. The trustees are not to get involved in the weeds with rank and file employees, even vice presidents or department chairs, although we may hear from the public, students and parents and other constituents about them from time to time. We have a relatively new president out there in Dr. Jack Bagwell, who I believe you have all met. He was a strong candidate, I'm told, by the trustees who are on the search committee, and he should be with us for a long time. If you were to ask me what is the number one challenge at College of the Albemarle, I would tell you that it is getting students in our neck of the woods, in this part of the state, to take advantage of the opportunities in education that are handed to them by their local, state, and federal governments. It frustrates me no end that we cannot seem to get our full-time equivalent enrollment much above 25 or 2,600 students. There are surely hundreds, if not thousands, of young people and older people in our area who would benefit from a community college education. I have in my own file 14 names of people I have offered to take out to the college, run them through the admissions and financial aid programs and see if I can get them enrolled. And I'm a bit embarrassed to tell you I've succeeded with one of them. And I was to have a meeting just this past Friday with the mother of a high school graduate who had expressed some interest in going to the college. She called me at 7 a.m. and said, no need to meet. He's decided that he's tired of formal education. He wants to go on and learn on the job like his father did. And yet his father is intermittently unemployed. So maybe there's a lesson there that he would have benefited from going to college and learning a skill. And unique to our area, you can get an associate degree at College of the Albemarle, and due to what educators call articulation agreements, you can carry most of your credits to any university in the state, which means you could ride your skateboard, your bicycle, or drive your car right across town to Elizabeth City State University, where we have one of 3 institutions with the College Promise program, which would give you a college education for very little money, particularly if you're able to live at home and commute. So I want to continue my own work at trying to bring more students to the college. I suspect that if you ask many people at COA what the number one challenge is, they might say money. But community colleges are funded just the way K through 12 education is, by head count. And there won't be significantly more money at College of the Albemarle unless we can get more of our students taking advantage of the opportunities that are given to them out there. And I want to continue to help trying to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Gardner?
I noticed that you're scheduled to complete your post as chair of the foundation,
Correct.
and then you're planning to continue as a member of that board. If we were to select you, would you complete your term there and only be on the trustees?
Not necessarily. The trustees has a policy of appointing 2 members, and they have a huge 19-member board, the biggest in the state. They appoint 2 members as liaisons to the foundation. I might be one of those at the chair's pleasure, but I served on that foundation board during all 11 years that I served as a trustee.
Okay, okay.
But my hope is to get the College of the Albemarle out of the golf business before I roll off as president of the board. My successor is Kathy Stallings, and I'm sure that all of you know that her late husband, Dr. Dwayne Stallings, was the superintendent of schools right next door in Perquimans County. So we are handing off the president's post of the foundation to someone with pretty deep roots in public education.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Gardner?
I know you talked about it, I know all the good work that you do, not all, but most of what you do in the city of Atherton. But one of the questions that we asked was, how would your appointment by this school board directly impact what you can do for the students? How would it impact?
I recall that as I concluded my remarks, I said, I forgot to answer one of their questions, which is mistake. I served for 25 years on the Education Foundation, which met right in this room, and resigned because their meetings came into conflict with my relatively new job as treasurer of Friends of Museum of the Albemarle, which meets on the same Monday night. But having been a PTA volunteer in the public school system, having had two sons who went through the public schools here, having raised money for the school system through the foundation, and been to numerous public school events while I sat on the school foundation board, I think I have a fair amount of knowledge about both the people in the system and what some of the needs are and what some of your challenges are.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Gardner, we appreciate your time. And you will be notified by a formal letter about our decision.
Okay, I thank you very much for your consideration and look forward to hearing from you one way or the other.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
That can happen. Hey, I've chaired meetings that have run over too. So, and then with the technical difficulties, that's something we all face now over the past year dealing with COVID. Thank you again.
Thank you.
That's to Donnie and Matt and Bradley.
I will. Saw Brad and Matt this weekend.
Well, I saw Brad today
Yeah.
at commissioner's meeting.
That's right. He was pleading his case
Yeah.
with the county board. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to hear from Mr. Luton, Bill Luton, and he is going to join us virtually. Hello, Mr. Luton.
Hello, how are you?
I want to thank you very much for being so patient. We went over at our meeting, as you are aware, you've been in plenty of these meetings and you know how it goes when you have discussions. Also, we had some technology issues. So with that said, we look forward to hearing from you. We want you to address some of the things that you've addressed in your application and your letter of interest. Kind of expand on those if you'd like, as far as what you are looking forward to as a Board of Trustee member. Why do you wish to hold that position? And how will you advocate as a representative from us as an appointee from ECPPS? How will you advocate for our school district on that Board of Trustees? So with that said, take it away.
All right, thank you very much. And I certainly understand what you were talking about before. It was kind of a nice walk down memory lane for me. I've spent many an hour and many an overtime hour in that room. So a lot of fond memories. Anyway, it's a pleasure to address the board today, and I thank you so much for your consideration. It means a lot to me. I'll start just by saying that the first time I walked into COA, I was 15 years old, and I was a sophomore in high school, responding to a call for auditions for a play. It was Our Town, actually. And ever since, I won't say how many years it's been since then, but ever since then, I've had multiple opportunities to work in and around COA, to get to know different administrators there, professors, students, to spend a great deal of time both in the Fine Arts Center and over on the academic side as well. So COA to me, I think it's such an important place, and it serves such an important role in our community, because so many graduates of high school, I think many times they leave high school wondering the question we always ask them from the time they're very young, which is, what are you going to do with your life? What are you going to do when you graduate? And many of them don't know even when they graduate high school. And I think one of the great things about COA and any community college is that it gives students an opportunity to have a little bit more time to figure that out, either through on-the-job type training, through technical programs, or through just saving a bunch of money as they start to collect those all-important first credits toward their college degree. And I'll probably jumble up some of my answers to all of your questions because it all just kind of blends together for me. I'll start by saying that once I left the Pasco County Board of Education, which I served on for 4 years, from 2008 to 2012, I continued my career in higher education, where I served first as a full-time professor at Elizabeth City State in the business school. And then I started teaching online at several different institutions, and landed at a place called Allied American University, which was located in Southern California. And there I spent a whole bunch of time working on everything from accreditation to assessment to curriculum, serving in roles from consultant to professor to dean of business, director of assessment, chief operating officer, and then actually did a stint as president and CEO, where I was an ex officio member on the Allied American University governing board. And in that role, I also inherited a pretty cool position as the chair of the Allied National High School governing board. So I had more opportunities for boardsmanship, even beyond the years that I finally spent in the room that you're in right now. So I think that addresses what I can bring to the table. But I think to really talk about what I can bring to the table also is what's going to answer your question about how would I represent the Elizabeth City Pasco-Tank Board of Education. And besides the fact that I cut my teeth right there in that room and became intimately acquainted with how things run at the K-12 level, not just any K-12 system, but this very system, I think that uniquely qualifies me to represent the board, because I know what it feels like to sit in your shoes. I know exactly what it feels like to sit in these committee meetings, to move on to the board meetings, and we didn't have to do the didn't have to handle the pandemic the way that you guys have, and I applaud you for the work that you do, and for the way that you've been able to keep things running in the midst of some pretty serious conditions. But we had some pretty serious conditions when I was there too. It was right in the wake of the crash there in 2008, and we had the worst recession since the Great Depression at that time, and had to navigate that for those 4 years. So I can appreciate a lot of the difficult things, the difficult decisions that you make, and I also think that I can uniquely appreciate what you expect as a board when you send someone to represent you on the COA Board of Trustees. So I think that's a pretty good encompassing view of what I would do, how prepared I am to serve on that board, my heart for the community, and also how well I would serve the school board.
I have a question. I noticed that you are, again, in a leadership capacity at Trident in California. And do you serve that university remotely?
Yep, I do. So I'm actually right here in this chair you see me in right now. It's a 100% remote position. I'm the department chair for management and leadership. So I guide our programs in the Bachelor of Science in Leadership and also our Master of Science in Leadership. And I supervise faculty all over the country and run those programs.
And so you wouldn't have any major obligations to this out of state university that would impact your ability to attend the meetings?
No, we do a graduation ceremony once a year, so a couple days a year, and we haven't even done those the last few years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Lee? Okay, well, Bill, thank you very much for your time. I think you did a great job of answering everything that we wish for you to answer, and we appreciate you coming. You will be informed by a letter about our decision. And again, thank you so much for your interest in this position. We appreciate the time you've taken with us.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your service.
Thank you. Robinson, you can either stand or you can have a seat at that chair, and we promise that's not the
Okay.
not the sweetie chair. We didn't set you up.
I'll stand here. Thank you.
Okay, I see. What we would like for you to do, first of all, thank you for being so patient. Our meeting ran over a little over, and then we had some technology problems. So anyway, thank you.
No. Been there, done that.
Okay. What we would like for you to do is we received your letter, we received your materials, we've looked over those, but we'd like for you to kind of expand on what it is, why you want to be a COA Board of Trustee member, what it is you feel you can do as that trustee member, as far as the impact you will make, and how effectively you can advocate for us as a representative of the ECPPS Board of Education. So with that, you have the floor.
Thank you. It's good to see all of you. Good to be back in this room. I'm missing a table, but that's okay.
No arrangement.
First, I want to thank you all for allowing me this opportunity, and just even more thanking you for the work that you're doing. Lord knows I know what you're doing. So during these times, just want to thank you for your service. I've been in Elizabeth City for a while. Came here in 1998 to be one of the vice chancellors at ECSU. I'm married to Jane King Robinson. I have a son, Javari, who graduated from Northeastern and was awarded the Moorhead Scholarship. I have a daughter, Camille, who graduated from Pasquotank County High School, who was also awarded the Moorhead Scholarship. So I'm very involved in education, not just on the outside of what I do, but on the inside with my family. I believe that this is a very crucial and important time for education now. Oftentimes you hear people saying, we want to get rid of these masks and go back to how it used to be. We can never do that. There's no going back. There are some lessons that we've learned through this pandemic. And one of them is that we just need to change our point of view of education. I'm concerned sometimes about the social emotional issues that are happening in this country and even around the world regarding the pandemic, but educationally, those young people who we are able to identify because during the pandemic, they turned back on the school because of the issues that they were having in the school itself, we can identify them. So we can't go back to just having in class and that's it. The hybrid is what we're going to do. It's how we're going to make that new inroad into education. And I think that with what I've done in education, with what I did at the university, what I've done for 18 years before I retired in working with early childhood, the counselor education programs that I've been a part of, currently board chair of the counseling licensing program in the state. I'm also president-elect of the National Counseling Boards. So counseling is very important to me. Past chair of Trillium. So those kind of social emotional things are important. So I bring that to the table because we're going to have to, as an educational body, look at how are we dealing with people from the emotional side. We've not spent a lot of time with that in the past, and we're going to have to do that now. Educationally, I feel that I bring to the COA board, one, I understand governance. Been on enough boards to understand what that means. I understand the shift in community colleges. There was a time when I would not have said that 50% of the young people who are students at COA are 25 and under. I would have always thought that was a much older population. So if that's where we are, then what are the different things we're going to need to do in terms of articulation agreements with our 7 counties that work with COA in those high schools? Early college is going to be different now because of who can have access to computers and who can now feel that they can do well in school. So COA, I think, also has to look at that old point of view of who went to community colleges. Those people are still there. Many of those lost their jobs during the pandemic. Many of them are going to need to be retrained, need to be trained. They're going to have to understand technology because that's what the future is going to be. So COA has to change how they've been doing business as well as other parts of the educational system. And I think that I can be extremely helpful with that. I feel that as you're looking at the 7 counties and the 4 campuses, that we're also going to look at our funding. We're 26 out of the 58 community colleges. How do we be a little more maybe assertive, if not aggressive, with our legislators in terms of getting the kind of money that needs to be had to change how we do what we do in higher ed? I feel that the work I've been doing the last 3 or 4 years, particularly with the legislature in Raleigh, 2 years ago, through my being chair of the counseling state board, we passed 3 bills, all through us. And one, we wanted to change our name from professional counselors to licensed clinical mental health counselors. But we also put in place a program is for impaired professionals, because in any profession, we have some folks who aren't doing well, who have some mental issues, but we don't have a program that helps them. We also talk about reciprocity throughout other states. So my involvement with the legislature, I think, will help me, gain some new inroads for finances for the community college. I feel that because I've been here in the city for as long as I have, and that I was chair of the chamber for 2 years. I was chair of Rotary Hospital Foundation. So I've been involved in the community and want to continue to do that. I'm retired, need some stuff to do, don't want to work again. But it's interesting because one of the things probably 5 or 6 years ago that happened to me was that as I was doing much more board work, I came to the understanding that my work was getting in the way of what I wanted to do. So retiring has allowed me to have the time to do those things that I think are most important. And I think that I can bring a new way of doing things, a new way of thinking. I work well with people, but I'm also don't have a problem with sharing my opinion. So I'm thinking that's some of the things that I think I can do to help the COA board.
How about your advocacy for us?
That's part of what I was saying, is that the articulation agreements that are held with universities, we have to have some of those same kind of agreements with our high school system, our school systems. I truly believe that the students that are in early college are not the only students that need to be having access to COA. And that as we look at those students who are looking at more career things, they're looking at culinary arts, they're looking at welding, they're looking at police training, fire training, that there are some young people that are still in our system who are saying, I don't think I want to get a 4-year degree. So what else can I do? So how can we be a little more forceful in helping them see that there are some things there? And I think that this hybrid way of doing education now is going to allow us to do that. So I will be pushing for there to be larger numbers of our system and the other 6 as well, but particularly our system having access to COA. Right here, the largest number of students at COA come from Pasquotank County. So I'm thinking that we can do this. And it would definitely be one of the things that I'd be looking for because of coming from this group, that I don't think our students know enough about the options and that we don't get them involved early enough to do some of the things that we're talking about. I should, but I don't necessarily believe that all people need to go to college. I think that COA, I think that training programs fit certain people. And all we have to do is let them know these are the things out there, and maybe help them move in a particular direction. I had a leak in my sink the other day, and I called a plumber. The guy did not have a master's degree, but the bill that I paid was one that said, this guy has a skill, there was a quality in his work, and he did an excellent job. So how do we get our people to see that there is worth in work and that there are other things that they can do? And I think I can help that happen because of the relationships I have with the school system here and talking with folks about you're not less than because you don't go to a 4-year institution.
Any other questions for Dr. Robinson? Anybody? Dr. Robinson, we greatly appreciate your interest in this position, and you will be informed by letter about our decision. And again, thank you for your patience.
No problem.
Apologize for the wait.
It's okay. And thank you for this opportunity. Be blessed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Houston. Yes. Can you take us into closed session, please? Since Dr. Williams is not here.
The board will go into closed session for the purpose of considering personnel actions that involve employees of this board as allowed by North Carolina statute 143-318.11A6.
We need a second for that.
Second.
Tammy, roll call vote, please.
Yes, Pam Perezza,
Yes.
Rodney Walton,
Yes.
Daniel Spence,
Yes.
George Archuleta,
Yes.
Virginia Houston.
Yes.
Motion carries.
We will now go into closed session. Thank you very much.
Shall I close this door?